You got your Mag guys here on Birds 365, and we've got Marcus Hayes from the Philadelphia Inquirer and WIP to jump in with us and talk some Birds football. Good to see you, Marcus. Thanks for jumping in. I'm really interested to see your take on the Eagles after two games, because we had a bunch of guys on before the season started, and you were one of the guys who raised more questions than most. That the Eagles had questions to answer, even though they were the NFC defending champions. 2 games in, 2 wins, 2 hard-fought games rather than a couple of their NFC counterparts like the 49ers and the Cowboys, who have won handily their first 2 games. How have your questions been answered so far in the first 2 Eagle games?
I guess my biggest question was about Nakobe Dean, the middle linebacker, and everything was sort of going to emanate through him, second-year player calling the defensive signals for first-year defensive coordinator Sean Desai, and Nakobe got hurt. So that big question, and it's a big question for me because he's a guy that they want to sign to a second contract, right? And if you can solidify that position with a 3rd-round pick who's going to get a modest second contract down the road, you're in really good shape, especially if it's a position that they don't prioritize or expect to spend a lot of money or a high draft pick on. So that big question has not been answered because Nakobe Dean's out for, what is it, John, 6 weeks at least? So,
yeah, well, at least 4 games. So, you know, but the injury certainly could linger past. I think a lot of people say 4 games. 4 games, he'll be out for 4 games. Not necessarily. He'll be out for at least 4 games. So we'll have to see how that shakes out. I do like your thought of modest, because if he plays too well, I've always said the Eagles aren't going to re-sign him to that second deal, because they just have proven time and time again, Marcus, they're not going to pay that position. So he almost has to be, to get that second contract in Philadelphia, he almost has to be good, but not too good. And I'm not sure. I think the Eagles get too caught up in that. I really do. If you have a good player, maybe it's not the best position to have a good player, but if you have a good player, accept a good player.
You know, I think they will spend modest money, because I don't think linebackers, unless they're sacking the quarterback, make real money anymore. You know, they don't make bank-breaking money much anymore. But the rest of the things that I wanted to see, I wanted to sort of figure out what's going to happen. Cam Jordan has been, you know, and this is dry stuff for your viewership, but Cam Jordan has been spectacular at right guard, especially as a run blocker. He hasn't made a ton of mistakes. He's been able to figure out blitzes. I mean, Jalen Hurts got sacked by Juden in New England because Lane Johnson misread the pass protection, and Cam Jordan didn't. So that question's been answered. But the biggest question, you know, are they going to be a 15-win team like I thought? Are they going to go 9-0 to begin like I thought? I think so, yes. The biggest issue right now is probably Jalen Hurts and his ability to process and deliver balls to open receivers. He seems a little gun shy right now, a little like, I don't want to make a mistake. And I don't have a problem with that with a guy with a new offensive coordinator. I know he's familiar with Brian Johnson, but it's a new offensive coordinator, and it's a new year. So my contention has always been it's a quarterback's first job to not lose a game, especially if he has a good team around him. And Jalen's done a very good job of that to this point.
Marcus, a lot of people who are singing the tremendously optimistic tune at the beginning of, oh, of course Jalen's going to be great with Brian Johnson. He's known him since he was knee-high to a grasshopper.
What does that mean? What were they talking ball at 4 years old? Was he talking ball? I always kind of snicker at that.
It's a cute story, but it doesn't necessarily tell the story. And I'm with you. It hasn't been this seamless transition from what Shane Steichen used to call. Now, I'll give Minnesota's defense for the last game credit. They said, we're going to dare you to run the football. We're not going to let you through. We're going to drop 9 guys back. We're going to rush 3, maybe even only 2. And the Eagles answered with a power running game, which is exactly what they should have. But Jalen's numbers don't jump off the page to start the season. You truly believe that it's because it's going to take time for he and Brian Johnson to get on the same page?
I don't think it's as much Brian Johnson as it is just Jalen. I mean, Jalen has to become he has to find his rhythm. And he's always been that kind of quarterback since we've been around him. He's a guy who is very cautious. He doesn't want to turn the ball over. He knows that he can make plays with his legs that keep the ball more secure. And again, this defense has been a lot better than I thought it was going to be this quickly, especially as far as like making plays and forcing turnovers. So a lot of people don't like the quarterback win set. Okay. I always counter with, okay, what about the quarterback loss stat? Because quarterbacks can lose games by themselves. They can't win them by themselves. Most of them can't. But there is such a thing as a quarterback who loses you games.
Zach Wilson.
Well, or last night, Deshaun Watson.
Deshaun, yeah. He's not been the same. Just hasn't been the same. 2-year layoff, basically.
Yeah, and he's a long, like he was making mistakes that, you know, rookies from small colleges make their first few games. So Jalen's strength is that he wants to win. That's his superpower. And he'll do anything he thinks he needs to do to give them the best chance to win. And that might not make, you know, it might not make AJ Brown super happy. It might not make Dallas Goedert super happy. But if he thinks that the ball security play to play requires X, Y, and Z, he's going to do X, Y, and Z.
Speaking of AJ, I'm going to use the Nick Sirianni scale, and I want you to use it, Marcus. So Nick described it as a 2 out of 10. AJ Brown, the dust up with Jalen Hurts when it comes. And anybody who's been around the NFL for 5 minutes knows great receivers want the football. I thought the bigger issue, Marcus, was the way Nick Sirianni reacted to that after the game, pretending he didn't know what was going on, even though everybody who shops like my wife and Jody's and has Amazon, they saw it. But Nick Sirianni's in the middle. I don't know. And then he finally admits, hey, it's none of your business. To me, it indicated this team's a little bit tightly wound right now. I thought, ironically, Jalen handled it very well. AJ left the locker room, so he didn't handle it well. I assume he will when we get into the locker room on Wednesday or Thursday. I forget what it is on the schedule. But your thoughts, first of all, 2 out of 10, the Sirianni scale. And how do you think the head coach and AJ handled it?
Well, in order, it was a 5 out of 10 because it's not the first time it's happened, and it's never appropriate. It's less appropriate when it's a team leader. And let's be honest, AJ Brown is a team leader.
Yeah.
So if he acts that way, you know, what's to keep Devontae Smith from acting that way, or Dallas Goedert from acting that way, or whoever? But you know, I know Dallas, I know Devontae. I don't expect either of them to act like that, and I do expect AJ to act like that. You know, it's just who he is. Clearly, AJ had a responsibility after a big win in prime time, first on the home opener, to speak to the press after the game, because speaking to the press is speaking to the people. And he didn't, which is disappointing. He's usually very, very responsible that way, but he wasn't this time. Maybe because he felt that he did something wrong and was embarrassed. I don't know. And Nick Sirianni is the same guy who told me, I think it was me, who asked the question when he was hired, that he had not looked at any tape of Carson Wentz before his interview with Jeffrey Lurie. And that's a lot. You know? You know, Nick lies sometimes.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate, and it's kind of insulting, you know, that he chooses to do that. And you know, it's a flaw, you know. But again, you have to remember too that Nick Sirianni is very much a work in progress. This is his 3rd year as a head coach, and he's a head coach at a place that's hard to be a head coach. So, you know, when those lights come on, even though it's a Zoom call with 40 reporters who are, you know, with their screens blackened because they're, you know, eating cereal or petting their dog or whatever, it's a big stage for him, and he doesn't always make the best decision or the best responses.
Marcus, off the 175 yards that DeAndre Swift put up the other day, does that get him number one back status for the entire year? Number one back status for this next game? The first carry of this next game? What did DeAndre Swift give himself as far as strength goes in the Eagles running back room with the performance he had on Thursday night?
I guess he earned the right to be Miles Sanders light, you know. And one of my greatest frustrations in covering the team when Miles Sanders was hurt is that I didn't think Miles Sanders touched the ball enough or was even used as a decoy enough. You know, I didn't think he was included enough. But I'm a big, establish the run guy. I'm not anti-analytics and I'm not anti-passing to win. But defenders will tell you, especially linebackers will tell you, they take it as an affront when you can run the ball on them. And if their first step is sideways or forward and you're throwing the ball, it's a huge advantage. So I think we're going to see DeAndre Swift elevated past Kenneth Gainwell. But that doesn't mean we're gonna have a bell cow, a workhorse. If somebody gets 14 carries, it's probably going to be DeAndre Swift and not Kenneth Gainwell, which, Kenneth Gainwell is what he is, but he's not 14 carries to 1 carry if DeAndre Swift is on your team. And I would wonder if Nick Sirianni and Brian Johnson weren't questioned about that usage by Howie Roseman and Jeffrey Lurie after the New England Patriots game, because we know that they meet with, Nick Sirianni regularly, and especially right after games. So DeAndre Swift was acquired because he's dynamic, and you have to touch it in order to show that dynamism.
Going back to Brian Johnson, Marcus, he got some boos early on against Minnesota. They were struggling a little bit early. Brian Flores brings some unique looks. I think they were confused a little bit early, but I thought it was nothing but positive. He said, as Jody pointed out, he wasn't coming out of those light boxes. They were trying to limit the passing game, limit Jalen in the running game. And they said, run on us. And the Eagles did. I think that's something Shane Steichen would have done. And I like Shane Steichen's play calling. And I like Brian Johnson's play calling because, and Jason Kelsey talked about this after the game, it was probably boring. Inside zone, inside zone, inside zone, inside zone. But if they're not going to stop it, take it. I think that's a positive. Other people are saying you got to throw the ball. You got to have these numbers. Why? If you're successful, they're not stopping it. And we just talked about DeAndre with 175 yards, career high for him. The offensive line was blowing people off the ball. To me, it made perfect sense. Any negatives to it?
Yeah, I'm kind of the opposite. I'm very critical of Brian Johnson because this is what should have been done from point A. If you're going, it's like a lesson they have to keep learning, and they learn it every few games, where they get away from the run and they give Jalen too much responsibility. In that, it's not just RPOs where he can choose to run, but it's called quarterbacks run. That's what they were booing. They weren't booing drop back passes. They were booing the called quarterback run, the designed run. And I saw too much of it in the first 2 games. I think Jalen's run the ball, 18, 20 times in the first 2 games. That's not sustainable, and it's not wise. He got hurt running the ball last year. He's going to get hurt running the ball this year. You saw some of the shots he took in the first 2 games, and a lot of them were by choice. It was like, here, hit our quarterback. So I didn't like what I saw from Brian Johnson in the first 5 quarters of his tenure as offensive coordinator. And I'm not sure it was his call on the sideline. I talked to Jason Kelsey and I went to say Landon Dickerson about, hey, you guys went to the run when you, between the first and second quarter, because it was the first possession of the second quarter, did you know you were going to the run? And you get that side eye look, like, we knew that there was going to be a lot of run calls there from that point forward, which implies to me that the head coach might have, interjected himself and said, "What are we doing here?" Now, I don't have any proof of that, but there was a philosophical change between the first and second quarter of game 2. The same way there was a philosophical change between games 7 and 8 in 2021 when Nick Sirianni gave up the play calling and gave it to Shane Steichen. Shane Steichen realized, okay, these are the limitations of my offense and especially my quarterback. These are the abilities of my offense and my quarterback. The abilities are my offensive line, which is a fine pass blocking line, is a much better run blocking line. And my quarterback isn't ready to throw the ball 40 times a game. So I think we see a clear line of demarcation in 2021, which I think they're 25-8 since then.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And in 2023, after 5 quarters, somebody said, "Hey, this is not our identity. We have to revert to our identity, even though we have a MVP runner-up quarterback and 3 excellent targets."
Marcus, I want to jump over to the defense side of the ball. You touched on them earlier. You're a little surprised that they've been effective at causing turnovers so far in the first couple of games. 4 sacks. So they're not quite on the pace of 70 last year, but not bad. But they're actually generating as much pressure right up the middle as they are on the edges. The 2 big dogs from Georgia are doing a great job not only playing the run, but collapsing the pocket and getting to the quarterback as well. Can they bank on that all year? Can both of the number 1 draft pick from Georgia the last 2 years play at this level for an entire 17-game season?
I think it depends less on them, Jody, than Fletcher Cox. Fletcher Cox has been spectacular in the first 2 games. It's his 12th season. He's as effective as he was when he was really good last year. He wasn't really good all of last year, but he was really good a lot last year. And he's playing great. He's probably their most consistent player right now, if Jason Kelce isn't, as far as just being, which is hilarious because I think they're 2 of the 3 oldest players on the team. Jason's 35 and Fletcher's 32. But yeah, he's been really, really good. He's a good mentor, and he still attracts a lot of attention. Most of the times you see Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis get into the backfield or make a stop, or touch somebody behind the line of scrimmage on like a running play, Fletcher is doing the dirty work on the other side still. So, and let's be honest, he's the one who shut down the New England game in the 4th quarter. He made 2 plays in the backfield, and I was like, he's been in there at that point. He'd been in for like 46 plays or 44 plays. Fletcher hasn't played 50 plays more than 5 or 6 times in the last couple of years. And I was like, what is he even doing in there? And he makes 2 huge plays. So yeah, the guys from J&J from Georgia, they're wonderful talents, and they're in a perfect position right now because Fletcher Cox and Milton Williams started the first game. They're both playing well. They're both veterans, and they're the 2 young guys are probably bigger, stronger, faster, maybe more talented than those 2 guys. But they have a wonderful rotation right now, and it starts with Fletcher.
Yeah, Milton's played well, as you mentioned, Marcus. He's a guy that not a lot of people talk about. And Josh Sweat's having a great start to the season. Hassan Reddick's had some issues. Now, part of it is, Minnesota has a bad offensive line. They don't have a bad right tackle. They have a very good right tackle. So Hassan had tougher duty. But he's dealing with that thumb issue. He had surgery. He's got to play. Handwork's important for a pass rusher. Do you think it's that, or do you think it's anything else going on with Hassan Reddick?
Well, he's not getting home from the left side either. They move him around. So he's not getting home from the right side. He's not getting home from the left side. He's not getting home on his stunts. I don't know. Maybe it was the lack of training camp. Maybe it's, he doesn't want to get hurt before he signs his extension, if he signs an extension. There are a lot of things at play with Hassan Reddick right now, and he loves to play football, and he really loves playing football in Philadelphia. He's really happy. But I don't know. He just doesn't seem to have the same step that he had before. And again, maybe it's a usage and conditioning issue. Maybe the next game and the next game he'll build. But yeah, it's odd to see against two offensive lines that were either undermanned or underexperienced. It's hard. It's strange to see Hassan Reddick not eating. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
Marcus, want to get your take on this two-part question. First question is easy, multiple choice. Yes or no? Setting the under/over at Braden Mann as the Eagles punter at 3.5 games. You going under or over? Will he last more than 3 games as the Eagles punter?
I'm going. I don't care. I hadn't heard of Braden. I hadn't heard of Braden Mann before yesterday.
No.
He's a punter. You know, there is a theory that you should never punt. You know, there is a contention that punting.
I'm waiting for that. I'm waiting for somebody to pull the trigger on that. Thought it might be Brandon Staley.
I don't want it to ever happen because punt returns are really fun to watch. You know, but the punters have always been, you know, coincidental to my existence.
All right, so then I will never be on the lookout for the if this happens, and John has suggested it happened this year early in a game that meant 0 because it was preseason. Jake Elliott, who seems to never missed a kick in preseason, and he did it when Ty Zettner was holding. And was it the fact that he just doesn't have that same karma, that same
kickers
feel?
are strange creatures, Marcus. I'm with you. Punters, who cares? Holders, those kickers, they get real twitchy if anything's different. If Jake Elliott starts to go south, I think that's the only reason this matters. If that and some of these kickers are really teetering on the brink of a mental break.
Well, I think that's nuts. I am not going to be documenting the holder chronicles.
Okay, I was wondering if I had to make
waiting
for. Don't have to worry about that in your column, huh, Marcus?
You know who the best holder is I've ever been around? Nope. Doug Peterson.
Doug was good.
Yeah.
Doug
was good.
Now here's why I covered Blair Walsh, who was an All-Pro as a rookie.
How come holders don't get to go to the Pro Bowl?
No, he was the kicker.
No, how come holders don't get to
go to the they should. Well,
you're right, Marcus.
Long
straight.
Yeah, long snappers. You're right. He was an All-Pro though as a rookie. They changed his holder. He was a disaster. I've never. Now that's an extreme example. It doesn't happen to that degree, but kickers are very sensitive creatures at times. I don't get that feeling from Jake Elliott, but I do think it's worth saying, worth mentioning. Just something to keep an eye on as they move forward. But you
think they go back and they think they go re-sign Aaron Sipos?
No.
I think he can hold for Jake.
Yeah, here's a legitimate. Hold on, timeout, Philadelphia. Here's a legitimate question for you two very knowledgeable football guys.
Who is the holder now?
Well, we believe it'll be Braden Mann, the new punter that they signed.
Well, why wouldn't it be like the backup quarterback?
They don't do that anymore because, it's interesting. Bill
Belichick. It would be great if Marcus Mariota, after all the Heisman hype and the high draft pick, became the holder.
Yeah, Bill. It used to be back then. Maybe a backup quarterback was a holder. Yeah. Sometimes a wide. They do all different things. Bill Belichick did every once in a while. You've probably seen it, Marcus. Bill will, if you talk about anything, but if you talk about the history of the game, he might go on a dissertation. He went off about the history of special teams, kickers, holders, punters for 20 minutes, talking about how it's changed. It was great. One of the issues was holders, and he mentioned that. Can't do it anymore. Those guys all work together. You have limited preparation time, so they can sit off on the other fields, whereas you need your backup quarterback and all that stuff. And back in the old days, you'd spend 2 minutes. All right, go practice a hold. Now it's much more structured.
Practice time is
but there's no reason for that. Like they have you know what I'm saying? I mean, why can't they practice holding with the backup quarterback? If the play blows up, he gets up and he throws pass.
Well, they could.
I know you've noticed this. The Eagles don't practice much.
Yeah,
the league only allows them so much practice time, and the Eagles do even less because God forbid somebody get hurt.
So use the extra. Use the extra for the holding practice. Nick could be 20 minutes late for his press conference.
Yeah, if he did that, though, Howie might come down and go, they could get hurt practicing the snap. You really want to put them at risk?
That's right. We have data on that.
They probably do. Don't
probably do.
You kid when you say that, but I can almost guarantee you somewhere in their files they've got data on injuries holding for kicking. That is just.
How come the punters is it worse to lose your backup quarterback in a game or your punter?
Well, if your starting quarterback isn't if
healthy,
you
lose your punter,
it's not an issue. If you lose your punter, yeah. I mean, generally kickers can punt a little bit and they can get you through the game. So, if Braden Mann were to get injured.
Don't they have the third quarterback now, though?
Yeah,
the
they do.
Yeah.
They do. Which is interesting because certain teams don't even use it, and that makes no sense to me. But yeah, now they have
there has to be something.
No, I can tell you why they don't use it, because they don't want to give up a 53-man roster spot. The Eagles are uber protective of all three of their 53-man roster spots. That's why they're elevating a punter every single week, because those 53-man spots are like gold in some teams.
Well, it's not about the 53; it's about the game day roster.
So
they're
John,
giving you an extra player.
No, but you have to be on the 53 to get that extra spot.
Yeah. But some teams with third quarterbacks, sorry, Marcus, aren't using that third quarterback because it makes no sense.
With 3 quarters on the 53 man.
Yes.
So, John, how many times can you be promoted from the practice squad?
3.
All right. So I would take the under, Jody.
So you think they're just going to rotate them in? And
we're going to have.
It could be the first team.
Thank you for reminding me, Marcus. I completely forgot. I was in the middle of a question and we got off on a tangent. I don't know the answer to this. I hope one of you two guys do.
They'll have 7 punters this year.
If Aaron Sipas got released yesterday, so
that'd be great.
He can sign on with any other team's practice squad, new kicker for the Eagles for the next, as Marcus and I suggest, 2 or 3 weeks, and then they go through the process again. If you re-sign Sipas, does that restart the elevation from the practice squad clock, or does the 2 times he's already done it count?
No, it doesn't restart for the Eagles.
Right.
Restart.
You sure?
Yeah. Positive.
Well, then Sipas isn't coming back.
No. He come back once.
He come back for
one game. Yeah. At Inkstained Wretch, follow Marcus on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, inquirer.com. Make sure you read him there. Sports Radio WIP. You can listen to him there, and we always love it when he stops by with us.
Is that it?
Well, no, last one for me. Jody's going to get the last one.
One last question each.
Yeah. What we haven't talked about, we got too mucked up. I'll take the blame for that with the punter conversation, but
older conversation.
Yeah, older conversation. Nickel corner. I mean, look, this team was healthy last year. Now, ironically, Avonte Maddox was one of the guys who was a little bit banged up, missed 9 games, but he was back for the NFC Championship game, the Super Bowl, although playing through an injury. Now, most likely done for the season, Marcus. They lost Zach McPherson in the preseason. Everybody forgets about that. He was going to be the backup nickel this year. Now you're down to Mario Goodrich. Now, Nick Sirianni said he likes his in-house options. Well, we started this conversation with Nick being less than honest. We'll end it. Any honesty to that at all, that he's happy with his in-house options right now?
Well,
slot cornerback.
The thing that intrigues me on a couple different levels is that James Bradbury practiced at slot a little bit during preseason, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, he did.
So that intrigues me because, number one, you'd be saying that position in certain alignments is as important or more important than the outside spot, because James Bradbury is making a lot of money to play nickel.
Yeah.
Number two, James Bradbury, to me, looks worst on the interior. When he has to deal with the player cutting in versus cutting out, he seems a little bit less comfortable, a little bit less aggressive. So maybe he's not the best option. So I wouldn't be surprised, assuming he comes back from his concussion on Monday night, to see him there a few times. And I think Josh Dobe would be on the outside, Jody, John, if I'm not mistaken. So maybe that's what he's talking about, that he has these pieces, but they might not be deployed in the in their normal roles. But yeah, it's kind of the talk of training camp was look at the depth they have at cornerback early in training camp, and now with 3 guys, 1 guy dinged up and 2 guys hurt, it doesn't seem to be quite as deep, and we're worrying about whether they're viable at that position with the personnel they currently have. But you'll see how good a job they actually did in scouting lesser known cornerbacks, and how good Sean Desai is at deploying them. It's a big, this is a really fascinating time for the defensive coordinator, because he's got a safety who's hurt, he's got a nickel corner who's hurt, he's got a cornerback who's hurt, but the defense is playing great anyway to this point against Mac Jones and lesser passers. And they're not going to, they got Baker Mayfield next. And I know he had a great game this Sunday, but Baker Mayfield is Baker Mayfield. So it's going to be an interesting first 3 weeks, because we don't know where they're going to be injury-wise next week. We don't know how they're going to perform in Tampa on Monday night with Baker Mayfield coming off, a validation game. So, yeah, the biggest question I think all of us had, because there's a little continuity in the offense if Brian Johnson becomes the offensive coordinator, there's no continuity on the defense. Fletcher Cox is coming back. Brandon Graham is coming back. They're a million years old. Reed Blankenship, who was afterthought this time last year, is the safety that you're depending on. And, you have a middle linebacker in Nakobe Dean who's never really played. So all of those questions some have been answered, some are now amplified. And you wonder how offensive coordinators are going to attack this defense, and whether Sean Desai is going to be able to get his players in the right positions and playing fast enough to counter that.
Marcus, my last question is, again, another 2-parter. Easy first one, multiple choice, and then give me a little bit more on the second end. Through 2 weeks of the National Football League season, how many teams are 2-0?
It's a quiz?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. 4?
No. 9. 9
Okay.
and 2-0, which you think, all right, first week 32, 50-50, cuts down to 16. Next week, 50-50, cuts down to 8. They're actually 9, so it's not that far off what the usual numbers would say. The analysis the Eagles would get out of their
I thought it was a trick question.
No, it wasn't.
Be like,
but here's the follow-up question that I want you to answer. Of the 9, how many do you think are in the NFC?
I don't know. 7?
7 out of the 9. And
See,
all John and I have been saying all offseason is, the AFC is so much better than the NFC. It's really top heavy. They got 9 undefeated teams in the 7 undefeated teams in the NFC, and only 2 in the AFC.
Well, I don't want to let people in on behind the curtain, because they might not listen to us, Jody. But let's be honest. If Aaron Rodgers wasn't hurt, the Jets would be really good. Last night, you see Cleveland.
Jets could be 1-1. If Aaron Rodgers, we're just talking about.
Well, they could be.
If Aaron Rodgers didn't get hurt, there's a good chance the Jets are 1-1. Anyway.
All I'm trying to say, this league's about attrition. You see Nick Chubb last night, horrible injury. I mean, that completely changes things for Cleveland, which I thought was going to be a team better than most people expected. This league's about injuries, man. And, we do the best we can when we try to pick these games. But I constantly say, tell me who's healthy. When people say play the win and loss game, Marcus, whenever the Eagles are playing the Cowboys, who's healthy? That'll tell you who I'm going to pick in that particular game. Both good teams, obviously, but Dallas looks like world beaters right now. Take Micah Parsons off that team, you take Tony Pollard off that team, all of a sudden shifts things dramatically. It's not a cop-out, but health means so much in the NFL, and the Eagles were extremely healthy. And Howie Roseman even said this a couple times in the offseason, Marcus. Mm-hmm. We probably can't count on being that healthy again. He was preparing people. And it's, Avante's a big injury, not as big as some of the other injuries, but Nakobe Dean, as you mentioned, already out. It's already more attrition this year than last year, at least early. It's not been devastating, but it could be a troubling trend, to say the least.
Well, I will say when Landon Dickerson hurt his left or right knee on a tush push play in New England. No, a tush push play in against who'd they play second on Thursday night? Who'd they just
Minnesota.
beat? Against Minnesota. And he was fine. And Fletcher Cox hurt his ribs, I think, in the opener. He was fine.
Yeah. But
to your point, if either of those injuries is more significant, they're a much diminished team. The 7 NFC team. I'm surprised, I guess. But your argument is a double-edged sword, John. Right? The NFC stinks. Okay. The teams
on
that
paper
are
it does.
On paper they do, but in the standings right now, they're dominant over the AFC.
Right, but they're not dominant because they beat good teams. They're dominant because they beat bad teams.
Exactly.
You have mediocre teams beating bad teams. If we were talking about 3-0 or 4-0, it'd be one thing. But we're talking about, the Washington Commanders and the New Orleans Saints. So
Tampa Bay comes in 2-0. They beat Minnesota. Now that, most people probably think they lose that game. It was on the road.
Mm-hmm.
Then they beat Chicago, who's a terrible team. So it's not like they've been world beaters, but they're 2-0.
Yeah.
I don't think
somebody's got to win them. Somebody's got to win. It's like the when a player goes to a basketball player goes to a mediocre team, somebody's got to get the points and the rebounds.
Yeah,
the player's
I say that all the time, Marcus. Jody hears me. 20-point score on a bad NBA team.
Somebody's got to shoot.
And I can give you one. His name's Kelly Oubre, and now he's a 76er. They signed him last night.
We go.
20 points on the Charlotte Hornets last year.
He ain't getting 20. He ain't getting 20. He ain't getting 10 shots on this team.
Not on this team. You are exactly right about that.
I think the best example I can remember is I think his name is Nikola Vucevic. He was a Sixer for a while.
Oh yeah, I love Nick. I love Nick.
And he's a wonderful backup 4-5 who's been starting for years. I think he was got all-star votes.
He was an all-star, yeah.
But I mean, it's not laughable because he's played to his capacity, but he's the perfect example of somebody's got to get those rebounds and somebody's got to take those shots.
Marcus, we always love when you come on with us. Thank you very much for doing so today. We'll get you back up again in a couple of weeks. Enjoy, brother.
All right. Thanks for having me, guys.
Thanks,
Marcus Hayes, Philadelphia Inquirer and WIP. You can catch him hosting shows there as well. All right, Johnny Mac coming back. We're going to get Kevin Kincaid from Carson brought up in about 18 minutes. All right, you want to stay put. Don't go anywhere. Because when I come back, I will annoy every single Eagle fan that is listening to us right now.
I like this. I like it.
Two words,
John. And I like it.
2 words. Power Index.
Oh boy.
The power in the
ESPN Football Power Index is back. I didn't even notice.
Is back.
All right.
And Eagle fans will not be happy. I can guarantee you that. MAGA Mac guys coming back here on Birds 365 next.